Hello and welcome to a special edition of Dialogue, a new path of modernization for all. This discussion is a part of the second International Forum on Dialogue between China and the World, chaired by Renmin University of China. This year, as we know, marks the 10th anniversary of President Xi Jinping's proposal to jointly build the Belt and Road Initiative. Over the past 10 years, the initiative has gradually become a popular international public project and a global cooperation platform. So what has made the BRI so attractive and distinctive from other projects? What has the BRI brought to those participating countries, and what will it bring to the world? And how can we understand and respond to criticism which may have hindered the willingness of some countries to participate? To discuss these issues and more, I'm glad to be joined by, we have Bruno, Maçães, former Minister of European Affairs of Portugal. And we have Zoon, Ahmed, researcher of the Institute of Belt and Road Strategy, Department of International Relations, Tsinghua University. We have Augusto Soto, Director of the Dialogue with China program at ESADE Business School, Spain. And we have Adrian Hearn, Professor of the Center for Spanish and Latin American Studies, University of Melbourne. And Wang Yiwei, Vice President of the Academy of Xi Jinping Thought on Socialism with Chinese Characteristics for New Era, Renmin University of China. I would like to briefly have you share with us your takeaways of the speech given by President Xi Jinping, basically setting the stage for the next 5 to 10 years about the development of a BRI. So I will start with Zoon, please.
Thank you so much, Indo. My key takeaway from President Xi's speech, first of all, is that his messaging, the Belt and Road Initiative's vision, which I think has always been a response to the much needed gaps that need to be filled in the world from day one. When in 2015, the initial first phase projects were announced, they were responding to the infrastructure gap, and then the gradual evolution. And today, as we are at the 10th anniversary, how he emphasized on unity, how he emphasized on countries promoting each other's development, recognizing that we as a world will prosper and perish together, and really talking about the commonalities. So 2 things that I'll point out. He mentioned that obviously we need to plan, build, and benefit together, right? The Belt and Roads vision is that all countries can benefit if we cooperate with a mentality of mutual respect and mutual benefit. And this is why, we see more than 152 countries as signatories or as, participants in one way or another to the Belt and Road Initiative. Secondly, it's interesting because the first summit focused on the hard infrastructure. The second in 2019 was about socioeconomic development, and gradually we have seen the GDI, GCI, and GSI, which are manifestations. So one of the expectations was the multilateralization, towards more multilateral efforts within the Belt and Road Initiative scope. And that is what was also mentioned in his speech. So this is very important. If we want to think about a shared future as mankind globally, we need to start by acting within regions. And you see China and Central Asia, China, South Asia, China, Africa cooperation. This is a very important step towards better synergy for us globally. So I think, it was the kind of message that resonates with the majority of the world. I think the flexibility of the Belt and Road to be receptive is something that developing countries have always wanted. And I think, it's also about showing respect to countries regardless of how developed they are, how significant they are today. It is recognizing our need to work together towards goals that affect a majority of the world's population.
Thank you, Zoon. Augusto, you are from Spain, from European countries. Yes. Zoon talked about the cooperation of the BRI, mostly among the global south, developing countries. How do you see, from a region with developed economies?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for this invitation. It is real. It's also quite encouraging to see that President Xi Jinping has having a plan, as clear the plan, long-term plan, to double down on the initiative, on these fronts. I have nothing to add to President Xi Jinping's initiative, of course. There are several measures, several long-term measures. It is a nice challenge in a way, because it's a call for us also to have long-term perspective, which you have in China. We don't have that in Europe, a long-term perspective, and no country actually, as far as I know. So it is the calling for new synergies, and more than insisting on investment that will be undoubtedly part of our common task. We need to promote more people-to-people exchange is also included in Xi Jinping's project, more scholarships, more interaction. This is crucial. It's crucial. We have to have a common narrative. We have different narratives right now in the world. Different countries have different views. We have conflicts, wars, and I think this is a driving force for peace, development. So I celebrate these decisions, and we need long-term perspective in Europe. From the Spanish perspective, we are celebrating 50 years of diplomatic ties this year, and the 10th anniversary of the Belt and Road Initiative, and also next year, the first arrival of the EU-Madrid train crisscrossing Eurasia, which has played a very important role. Because it opened a new, collaboration route. So many projects in Latin America, also in Europe, for example, in Croatia, and I could quote so many other projects, but I think we have little time. So I celebrate this, and this is a challenge for us also to have long-term.
Yiwei, I want to ask you this question. President Xi Jinping, in his speech, he talked about the two development banks of China, each setting up like 350 billion yuan for the financing window, and also plus an injection of 80 billion yuan for the Silk Road Fund. Are you surprised with the announcement of actually, a stronger commitment, doubling down on the Belt and Road projects here?
Well, yes. Big surprise. So many people said that now everybody, because of the domestic debt, including China, many cut the budget, but China actually empowered the BRI from financial investment and also institutionalized of the mechanisms. So now we have the Secretary General of the BRI Forum. And secondly, I think this is also support modernization for all. We say on the basis of the Chinese modernization, now it's for all other countries also can achieve modernization. And the third keyword I would like to use is globalization. So globalization is the trend, this reality, which cannot be changed. So some people say deglobalization or the globalization is the end. So China support globalization, but reform the globalization through BRI. So that's the financial investment. But also this investment is different with the previous one, because this time is to actually high quality development. It's more from bilateral and to multilateral, as you mentioned, and even globalized of this. So this is institutionalized. I think it's a structure of this financial investments different. So that's, I think, the crucial.
Continuation, but also something different here. Professor Hearn, your expertise is on Latin America, Spanish, the world. What's your observation of the summit so far?
Well, thanks, Mr. Xu. I've had the good fortune of seeing some of these challenges from multiple perspectives, because I'm half British and half Brazilian, and I live in Australia. Those are countries with very different priorities and different aspirations. So what I perceive is an evolution in the BRI. I see that 10 years ago, BRI was focused on the big picture infrastructure. 5 years ago, the goal that was emphasized was on small but beautiful projects. And then now we hear President Xi a focus on high quality ecological and people-to-people projects. So a stronger focus on cultural exchange. So this is an evolution that I think is really positive, because one of the things it should achieve is to inform people and make people around the world, everyday people, normal people, more aware about the BRI. Because otherwise, if the focus is on high-level infrastructure, everyday people may have little idea what the BRI is or never even heard of it. So I think this next phase is a necessary one. It's a good one, and I can think of several examples that are already underway, such as a project I've become familiar with, 菌草，这是一个蘑菇的项目。So mushrooms, yes. Mushrooms, a traditional Chinese approach to cultivating mushrooms that's been now adopted in 106 countries around the world. And what's interesting is that this traditional Chinese approach has been married up with contemporary scientific research on mushrooms and their nutritional and their ecological benefits. So this coming together of tradition with science, I think, is a really positive step, and it's the kind of thing that I think now, with this third phase of BRI, hopefully we'll see more of.
Hopefully we will see more of that. Bruno, I know you are a keen observer of the big powers, geopolitical rivalry, things like that. Also, you have your own understanding of modernization. All we talked about infrastructure construction, even the mushrooms there, green economy, digitalization, is all part of the process of modernization. What do you see as probably distinctive about the Chinese pursuit of modernization here?
I think China's approach to modernization has shaped the BRI. It's a country that is still developing, a country where every time I come here, I lived in Beijing for 1 year just before the pandemic, you see an enormous drive towards technological growth, technological development. And the result was that the BRI turned out to be much more focused on developing capacities than traditional models of globalization. It's not enough to open borders or to remove obstacles. That negative approach is not sufficient. You need also to build capacities. People can only join globalization if they have the ability, the capacity, the powers to do that. So the BRI is different in that sense. Another way I think it is different, it does, from the very beginning, from 10 years ago, it does appeal to a long historical trajectory. We sometimes think about relations between nations in terms of what happened last year or the last 5 years. We don't know, we don't like what this country did last year, so suddenly we are adversaries. And I think my own country thinks about these things very differently. You know that we have a 500-year relationship with China. And so when people in Europe sometimes or in the United States say China is an enemy or is an adversary, for us, the question is posed over a period of 500 years where we had excellent relations with China. And I think the BRI also tries to capture that it is perhaps very human to think about what happened yesterday. But we have to elevate our perspective to thinking about centuries. This is the political responsibility, to think about the long term, not to think about what happened yesterday and be captured by the news of the day.
Yiwei, I want to start with you here. Infrastructure construction is or was or still is the focus of BRI. Tell us, from the Chinese own experience, why infrastructure is a priority, is that important to modernization?
Indeed, I attended the ceremony, opening ceremony in the People's Hall. All the leaders, including the UN Secretary General, mentioned about infrastructure building. I think that's the attraction to the Chinese modernization opening reform. Said, if we want to get rich, build the road first. If we want to get rich quickly, build the motor road. If we want to get rich immediately, build the internet road. But most importantly, if we want to get rich jointly, connect the roads. So mutual connectivity, I think that's the key. So first, build the roads, infrastructure building. Under so-called the Washington Consensus, new liberalism, globalization, private capital, no so many interests invest in the infrastructure building. For instance, that's the reason the US even suffered poor infrastructure domestically. So how can you help you to build the infrastructure, private capital driven? No. But actually, there are many other countries just sell the raw materials to the Western countries. So they are not industrialized. So when the Chinese come to invest, they built the electricity, water, all this infrastructure, and then industrialization happened. For instance, I just come back from Indonesia. We built the high-speed railway for 350 kilometers per hour. That's the two superpowers in the world. China and Indonesia has such highest spirit of the railway. But it's not about this railway. They connect to major cities, and then the rail estate, tourists, all the industries, we said a cluster of the industries were boomed. So that's kind of China modernization, I think, because China has most complete and I think categories of all the industries in the world. So everything built with China and made in China is most efficient and low cost.
Indeed, if you look at infrastructure investment, I mean, private investors, have little interest because the returns will take a long time. Speak of the infrastructure building. I mean, CPEC, China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, is critically important to both countries. I would say, in particular, to Pakistan. That's an opportunity to develop. How much have we achieved? I know, Pakistan used to be like the shortage of power. Sometimes that's a pain for a lot of people and also for industries.
So you mentioned the shortage of power. We actually refer to that period, which started in 2007 as one of the worst economic crises the country had experienced. So for example, in major cities like Lahore, Karachi, Islamabad, we had load shedding of 12 to 14 hours a day. The country was deindustrializing. While I was in my university years, people were relocating to other countries because it was simply not feasible. Now, the thing is that Pakistan had a plan that we need to obviously upgrade our energy infrastructure, our transportation infrastructure. We know that was also security-wise a difficult period, so we needed to really improve both. And we wanted to develop the port of Gwadar. In 2014, at the UN General Assembly, the Pakistani Prime Minister at that time said, that we need trade, not aid, specifically to Western powers. Months after that, the first phase was announced. And this phase included, at that time, $46 billion of investment in the specific areas that Pakistan needed. It was basically a mixture, a combination of Pakistan's own, at that time, domestic vision and what China could offer. And since then, now 8 years on, we have seen that Pakistan doesn't have the same kind of energy shortages. We have better transportation infrastructure. You just mentioned the railway in Indonesia. In Pakistan, we did not have public transport in mega cities like Lahore and Karachi, and now we do because of CPEC. More than that, the evolution of CPEC, we started to talk about socio-economic development. More than 100,000 Pakistanis have benefited from Chinese scholarships, which is improving their skills, and that is obviously an extension. The imports and pipelines are not just for the sake of it, we have to utilize it. So China has also worked a lot on skills development. We are improving our agriculture. More than 200,000 jobs are directly linked with CPEC and many more indirectly. We have stories of women empowerment. We have a lot of, even schools, hospitals. The point, I think, in the end, in a nutshell, if I have to add, that in 8 years, any conversation about development in Pakistan, CPEC has been at the center of that. We are learning how to develop in a better way. We are now considering greener technology, greener infrastructure, because China's investment over the years has made it feasible for developing countries to consider greener alternatives, including for Pakistan. And lastly, I think I'll just add that, CPEC, ideally, the vision is to serve as a connectivity point for Central Asia, for Iran, for Pakistan, for the region. And of course, we are not there yet, but in the end, such infrastructure development, improvement in skills, etc., can benefit an entire region. So hopefully, in a few years, we'll see the impact beyond Pakistan.
Bruno, with the BRI, 10 years and probably next 10 years with the development, with the speed of growth, expansion, how would that affect this geopolitical landscape? As you once said, Biden once told Xi Jinping, a possibility, right, is the word to define the US. What is the word to define China?
Yes, this is what I ask everyone when I come to China, and you have to tell me. You know, there is a sense that possibility defines the U.S., but it's individual possibility. But of course, the sense that societies are moving forward and that societies also have an open future, this is an idea that is very much in crisis today in Western societies. We tend to think that we no longer have the ability to change reality. When I hear people in China talk about the future, it's much more about the ability to actually change societies. The idea that the future is open seems to me a very appealing idea. Now, in my book in 2019, I discussed the Belt and Road more or less in these terms. And I thought back then that the Belt and Road cannot be limited to infrastructure, and that perhaps the future of the Belt and Road is quite open.
And you are right.
I think I turned out to be right, because coming here now 4 years later, the Belt and Road that I hear about is a Belt and Road that perhaps could not have been predicted in 2019. There's emphasis on things that were not talked about back then. There is a sense of historical change and historical novelty that I think is important. Now, as you say correctly, the Belt and Road has also been captured by geopolitical competition. This is another change that's happened since 2017. Even the United States sent a representative to the first Belt and Road Forum, which now seems unthinkable. So it is a challenge for the next 5 or
They're
the
still
next,
welcome today.
but they didn't. It's a challenge for the next 5 or 10 years, how to respond to this fact, and how to remove the Belt and Road from the chessboard of geopolitical competition. I think that's what I'm curious about for the next 5 or the next 10 years, how this can be done. And it won't be easy. It won't be easy because the world is captured by geopolitical competition. And we now have a Chinese model of modernization and a Western model of modernization. And what I see is that they are, in a way, competing against each other.
China is learning by doing, doing by learning, or learning by doing. We are not a religious society thinking that is, we have a model, we sell this model to you. No, you be yourself, not to be us. You cannot channelize. So that's the reason the Chinese modernization or China path to modernization, to be yourself. Everything should localize, globalization localized, not westernized, not, of course, not channelized. So it's not a challenge, so-called the Western model in globalization or universalism, but on the contrary, it's building the condition, let the market works, let the high standard of the Western modernizations adapt to the local condition of the poor countries or developing countries. So China is a bridge, connect West, Globe South.
One thought I was left with is China does have a great advantage, that it is, it's the second great project of modernization after the Western project. And in that sense, it can look back and learn from the mistakes that the West has made. And in fact, I think the dialectic that we're seeing in China today is very much about doing that. For example, when it comes to the environment, it's learning about the mistakes of the first wave of modernization. When talking about geopolitical competition and trying to overcome that, it's learning from the way that the first wave of modernization worked out. So in life, we don't have a second chance in our individual lives. We only have one life. But when it comes to modernization, it's possible to try again and try better than the first time.
But China is also leading in some areas. There's a learning curve, and then China is leapfrogging and is leading in some factors, some areas. For example, green development or the e-commerce. E-commerce China is also leading, and digital economy China is also leading, I would say.
I think there are so many ideas that were just discussed. I'll try to maybe comment based on what you just said. First of all, any developing country, be it Pakistan, be it, somewhere in the African continent, Latin America, no developing country is sitting there thinking, you know what, we want to choose who will dominate us. They're just thinking who is interested and has the capability to meet us halfway at least, right? They're not sitting here thinking, okay, now we want to be again, we want to be able to choose between one power or the other. And the truth is, in recent years, and Bruno mentioned this, in China, what you see is dynamism. Over the last 45 years, especially when people whether they're from the global north, global south, eastern, western, it doesn't matter. They come to China, they study China, they observe what's happening in China consistently, especially since the reform and opening up, they see dynamism, potential, and because of that, some optimism. And that is attractive to developing countries. The Belt and Road Initiative is not expanding because China is going knocking doors of developing countries. Actually, developing countries need a lot of resources. They want to modernize. They want to be able to, have solutions that can work for their development. They have protested against development models that were imposed on them for decades. So even one of the other speakers earlier in today's session mentioned that, the idea that countries should be able to pursue their own path of development. They should be able to, find solutions that are suitable for them. This concept has existed actually for many years. The Bandung spirit is something that the BRI today connects very well with. It was the idea that we should be able to pursue independent paths. So that said, I think given how fast China is advancing, given that China has a long-term perspective, given that China is part of the global south, China can relate. China can understand the challenges. China is very developed and also just coming out of poverty, has come out of poverty recently. China has the experience and expertise to be able to help countries, whether they're in the global north or the global south, understand the unique solutions to them. So I think it is the flexibility of the BRI that is making it more successful, attractive. And I also think, calling the BRI maybe controversial in any way or as a source of geopolitical tensions. I mean, that is a very minority view. It is a very minority view, right?
This is a question I'd like to pose, actually. BBC covered the event calling it a gamble. CNN called it controversial, that issue. Anyone you want to respond to that kind of criticism?
Well, I think we know more or less what we are talking about, on the Belt and Road Initiative, but let's think of what the common people think in Europe, for example. This is an issue, so we need to increase the quality of the narrative of the Belt and Road Initiative, what it's all about exactly. For example, I just was in Guangzhou with a delegation visiting there to see the dynamism of the economy, to be able to buy a jacket at 10 p.m. or 11. This speaks volumes of dynamism of Chinese economy, but the reports in the West right now are different on that economic development. If you are talking of Fujian province, in the West they are thinking of something else, not thinking of shops open until 11 o'clock in the late afternoon, and so dynamism, people hardworking, but people in the rest of the world, I mean, read certain media, etc. So you mentioned some. And that's a challenge, to have some more common narrative.
Yeah, narrative. When they talk about that issue or that trap, in particular, of course, it's about developing countries. It's like the developing countries, they are not able to think for themselves.
Many people talk about that trap, but they're not even they don't know what's the meaning of that trap. If there is that trap, why Americans, Europeans, that have their own versions of a BRI, right? The US has a building back better word, and then PGII, then so-called Europe, Middle East, and South Asia economic corridors. You say they're trap, you do the trap? Okay, we should trace back the true meaning of the debt trap, because China is not OECD member, not joined the Paris Club. So traditionally, those countries, you want to build infrastructure, loan the money from the World Bank, and then you own debt, and then IMF will take care of you, and then interfere in domestic affairs, good governance, democracy, whatever, many conditions. And then you follow the trap of IMF, actually. And because China is not a member.
That sounds more like a trap.
So now down by China say, no, don't need these preconditions, politicalization of the loan. We have a developing bank We have Import-Export Bank, which is more than 200 countries, development bank combined together. So that's the debt comes from.
Yeah, of course, that problem has been worsened with the 3-year pandemic and the Ukraine conflict over there, and the increasing interest rates in the United States. You see, China is embracing free trade, globalization. Well, Washington is more inward-looking, sometimes turning into protectionism. This is really, you see the world is at a crossroad, which way we are going to follow, which direction we are going to turn, and that probably will decide the fate of the human being here. Bruno, how do you see, what's your observation? What's the next step probably, or next stage for the world?
The world is changing. It's changing very fast. That always creates resistance, and that always creates turmoil. Now, the way I see it, those problems have to do with the need to find a new balance and equilibrium of power at the global level. People want to decide the rules of the game, and there are many different opinions about what the rules should be. By the way, we now increasingly live in a world without any rules. And the project is to build those rules anew. I hope and I think that there's enough space for different actors to contribute to the new rules. I mean, if you think about the global system as a computer program, and there are software programmers, different software programmers can contribute with different parts of the code. It doesn't have to be a single software programmer to design the rules. It is not going to be possible to convince the whole world that the rules you designed are best for everyone. We need some kind of global democratic framework. We need a way to combine different contributions from different parts of the world, from different continents, when we build the global system. Someone today at the conference had a product. It was a mixture of coffee and tea, which, by the way, I don't look forward to trying, because I'm addicted to coffee, to very good espresso, and sometimes I don't like to mix things too much. But I think when it comes to power, it's always good to mix. It's always good to combine different sources of power and to find a balance and an equilibrium. So, what I would suggest is that we can define a global system where different ideas about what the global system is can be combined and mixed, like the coffee and tea in that wonderful product that I think is being sold in Chinese supermarkets.
About
Yiwei,
the tea and the coffee, I really want to say something. There are 3 approaches to deal with coffee or tea. American approach, either or. Yeah. Tea or coffee.
Or coffee.
That's Americans' approach. And then the European Union approach, drink tea first. Then sooner or later, you should drink coffee, because there is a linear evolution approach. Famous argument by Robert Kubo said, we European Union, we are the post-modern. China, you are modern. Somali, they are pre-modern, okay? So you guys sooner or later will join me. I'm the empire by example. And then the third model, Bruno said, mixed coffee or tea, tastes terrible. You don't like, right? No, it's not Chinese modernization. It's not a BRI. BRI says, you can drink your coffee, I can drink my tea. Not blame each other. Try to test. Try to learn from each other. You drink coffee, so enjoyable. It looks like I drink the coffee, so smells so good. Even I drink tea. So try to imagine, even you don't drink tea, but you think that guy drink the tea so enjoyable. It looks, I drink the tea. So this is chemistry interaction. It's not physical. It's not either or mixer or parallel. So it's China's path to modernization. We say this is a parallel paradigm. For instance, the Western says, you do agricultural modernization first, then industrialization, then digitalization, and then the developing countries follow. And then when you digitalize, and then they're smartalized, you always live in the shadow of the West, advanced economy. The Chinese modernization says, you can do both. Digital industrialization, industrial digitalization. So that's the reason Africans, maybe people say, oh, poor, you guys don't need the digital TV. Star Times came to Africa, then changed the situation. Before, they have the digital TV, it's per hour, $100 US, too expensive. When the Star Times came, then $5.
It's an Africa-based
because China is the People's Republic of China. So it's worked for the people. It's not private capital-driven. So I think that's the reason so attractive to the developing countries, BRI.
You know, modernization for developing world, for the global south, that's certainly, worthwhile. That's certainly efforts, worth to be made by China and a lot more developing countries here.
Yeah, I'm convinced of that, but mixing up like coffee, tea, and maybe milk or whatever, the world is so unpredictable right now. I absolutely agree that with the global south that we should move forward, and not only the global south, we should find a common language. When we convey a message, the other gets it. We should try to repeat and repeat, and then this Belt and Road Initiative, the diplomatic dimension is important. We should persist in that so that the other understands the same. Yeah, I totally vote for that, for integration, for the global south, China and the global south, China and the northern hemisphere. We have a lot to be done, but we have to be better trained, all of us.
Well, Adrian, you have the privilege of the background from your mother's side, Brazilian perspective, and also the British perspective, So, how important it is, to look at a particular issue from different angles, different perspective, so as to gain a better understanding.
Yeah, thank you. That's right. I think when we can look at these things from different perspectives, even though we may not mix our tea and our coffee, we may mix some ideas. And I think the point of today's discussion has been to do that, to mix our ideas on what modernization means. And so there's been some talk about mistakes that Europe and the United States have made with modernization and the impacts in the world, but also some points that Professor Wang Yiwei said about learning from those experiences. And so if we consider this title, BRI, a new path of modernization for all, the goal here is quite clear. There are multiple communities within every country. There are different ethnic groups. There are different genders. And we haven't spoken much today about this issue of inclusive engagement that the BRI can undertake as part of the people-to-people exchange. I think we do need to talk about gender. We do need to talk about women's leadership in the BRI projects and ethnic diversity. These are things that can be achieved. Now, it might be possible to learn some of those ideas from a postmodern idea, but actually, this could form part of China's original modernization. In that sense, it could be a step ahead and already incorporate these postmodern ideas. So I hope that that's the kind of modernization that we will arrive at together.
Yeah, let's hope for the next stage of BRI development for the new ideas. Last words, Zoon?
I feel like a lot of times, we give too much importance to some of the criticism that's just, intended to, that is emanating out of, genuinely a very zero-sum mindset. I don't remember the last time I saw a mainstream American media outlet caring what a local Pakistani or Bangladeshi or Ugandan media said about the US. They didn't care. I think, so we give too much importance sometimes to, so what if they call it a debt trap? Does the country where the BRI is manifesting, do they call it a debt trap? Of course.
Good point.
Right? So why are we reducing our own importance by giving this, making this the center of the topic? Yes, of course, we should discuss. There have been many projects that were not as feasible. That's why we say that the BRI is meant to be receptive, responsive. There have been a lot of times that many countries, yes, they have agency, but sometimes they're thinking short term. And that's why, in this forum, there is a big focus on small and beautiful projects, better feasibilities, more agency. Many developing countries, they want to say, okay, China, it's just inevitable, China will make the CPEC or other Belt and Road projects successful because China has a history of success with its own modernization and development. So countries need to recognize that it's not China that's going to make the projects in their country successful. They have to make them successful. So I think, we've had a lot of discussion about how we can promote better quality development, how we can promote better quality dialogue. I just want to emphasize that, the trajectory that the Global South is on right now is that we are becoming more important. We are becoming more central. We are becoming more aware that the experience those in Africa, those in Latin America, parts of Asia have had was not isolated. It's a common experience. And the fact that because of the Belt and Road, because of other initiatives, because of multilateral initiatives within continents, we have more platforms to exchange, understand. So let's, of course, let's have an open attitude and open engagement towards people or countries that are suspicious of what it is about, but in the end, it's not about a reaction towards we want to dethrone the United States or the global north. It's really about what do we need in the process of our own development. And that's the focus. And I think this is what we should just act, walk the walk, which is what we're doing.
Last words, Yiwei.
About that trap, I remember there is a story that one guy, eat too much bread. They eat 10 slices of the bread and fell too much and they blend the last one. But you forget the previous 9 one. And most importantly, the last one, the 10th one, is not the previous one, because this is about infrastructure building and then about industrialization, like Hambantota Port. Actually, Sri Lanka, 12% or less 10% is on the debt to China's investment. And then the new one is about not about the port, but also around the Hambantota. They built the airport, they built the highway, they built the hospital, they built all this economic zone, industrial park. So begin the industrialization and earn the money, and then pay back of the previous 9 slices of the bread. So this is the last of the bread to digest the previous 9 breads, different bread. So that's the secret.
Thank you, Yiwei. Let's focus on the small yet beautiful projects, the livelihood projects, instead of chaos and conflicts. We are focusing on development. That's very important. Well, with that, we are coming to the end for today's discussion. Many thanks again to our guests. You can also find us on the CGTN app on YouTube. I'm Xu Qinduo. Thanks for being with us. See you next time.